Tradcast Express. Tradcast Express. It's Thursday, July 27th, 2017. Shock, horror, and panic. That's what a lot of people in the conservative and semi-traditionalist wing of the Novus Ordo sect are experiencing today, as LifeSite published a report yesterday according to which Pope Francis is reportedly planning to revoke Benedict XVI's universal indult for the traditional Latin Mass, his famous Motu Proprio Summorum Pontificum. LifeSite verbatim, quote, "Sources in Rome told LifeSite last week that liberal prelates inside the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith were overheard discussing a plan ascribed to the Pope to do away with Pope Benedict's famous document that gave priests freedom to offer the ancient rite of the Mass. The overheard plans are nearly identical to comments from an important Italian liturgist in an interview published by Francis Lacroix earlier this month. Andrea Grillo, a lay professor at the Pontifical Athenaeum of St. Anselmo in Rome, billed by Lacroix as close to the Pope, is intimately familiar with Summorum Pontificum. Grillo told Lacroix that Francis is considering abolishing Summorum Pontificum. According to Grillo, once the Vatican erects the Society of St. Pius X as a personal prelature, the Roman rite will be preserved only within this structure. The plan, as related to LifeSite, involved making an agreement with the Society of St. Pius X and, with that agreement in place, sequestering those Catholics wanting the traditional Latin Mass to the SSPX. For most, that would strip them of access to the traditional Latin Mass, since there would not be nearly enough SSPX priests to service Catholics wanting the traditional Latin Mass worldwide." Unquote. Now, obviously, we can't say for sure whether this whole report is true or not, but that's not even the point so much, because it certainly could be true, meaning it is possible in principle, since what one pope can permit, another can forbid. That's how Catholicism works. Not that either Francis or Benedict is actually a valid pope, but the principle holds. Recall Pope Pius XII in his encyclical Mediator Dei, quote, "The sovereign pontiff alone enjoys the right to recognize and establish any practice touching the worship of God, to introduce and approve new rites, as also to modify those he judges to require modification." Unquote. Yes, that is what traditional Catholics believe. And if this is news to you, maybe you've been reading too much Michael Davies and Chris Ferreira and not enough, Catholicism. So Francis might toss out Summorum Pontificum. What does this mean for droves of semi-trads and conservative Novus Ordos? Utter panic. Why? Because they live inside their indult mass bubble and have long disconnected themselves from the very religion under whose auspices their mass is made available. Folks, we said it back in 2007 when Benedict XVI released his Motu Proprio. This document is only cosmetics and rests on the false principle that Catholics must have permission from modernists to worship like Catholics. Just because Benedict gave a blanket permission doesn't mean it wasn't still based on a permission. Quite the contrary, actually. And so this false principle is now coming home to roost. What a Benedict can grant, a Francis can simply take away. The problem here is not one of which sacramental rite is used or permitted. The problem is that people continue to recognize anti-Catholics as the head of the Catholic Church. We've got a whole big blog post on this issue with all the details and plenty of links, so check it out at novusordowatch.org/wire. Look for the post entitled, "Is Francis Planning to Rescind Summorum Pontificum?" posted today, July 27th. Then there's another big blog post that you don't want to miss, which we published July 25th, and that one is entitled, "The Stumbling Block of the Papacy, Why Bergoglio Doesn't Fit." More and more people are stumbling over the Catholic doctrine on the papacy. Why? Because they insist on accepting Francis as a true pope. Case in point, the Novus Ordo deacon Nick Donnelly, the blogger and remnant contributor Hillary White, and columnist George Newmayer, author of the new book, The Political Pope. Now let me go through this in a jiffy. Nick Donnelly has been very active on Twitter and always used the handle Protect the Pope. Well, he started that when Benedict XVI visited England some years ago, and now, after 4 years of Francis, he realized that he just couldn't continue with that handle because it's obvious that Francis is an enemy of the faith. And so he changed his handle now to Protect the Faith instead. And I have a feeling that if Twitter didn't have a character limit, he might have changed it to Protect the Faith from the Pope. Well, anyway, the point being that here we can see very clearly that in the Novus Ordo Church, the Pope himself is not the rock instituted by Christ to keep the Church firm and secure in sound doctrine, as Catholic teaching says. No, to the contrary, everybody else, it seems, has to protect the Church from the Pope, thus making a mockery of Catholic teaching about the nature, the power, and the purpose of that august office of the Roman Pontificate. And so Donnelly has stumbled, I'm afraid, over the papacy. As has Hillary White. She sent out a tweet the other day with these words, quote, "Hey guys, here's something to think about. What if Vatican I was, well, wrong?" Unquote. Hey guys, here's something to think about. What if Hillary White is, well, a heretic? Because heresy is not only denying Catholic dogma, it's also doubting it. So here we can see that it has become so woefully obvious to White that the idea of Jorge Bergoglio as the Pope of the Catholic Church is so totally incompatible with church teaching on the papacy from the First Vatican Council that White is starting to doubt not Francis, unfortunately, no, church teaching on the papacy. And this is where accepting Francis ultimately leads, heresy. And then George Newmayer. He was a guest on the Tom Woods show the other day discussing his book about Francis, when the host, Tom Woods, asked him what he'd like to see happen ideally, and Newmayer responded, quote, "This might sound glib, but the best case scenario that I could envision would be if the Pope converted to Catholicism," unquote. Yeah, wouldn't that be good? If the rock, the foundation of the church, the man with the unfailing faith could actually, become a Catholic. It will be so helpful, especially when you're reading Vatican I's teaching on the papacy, which says, quote, "By unity with the Roman pontiff in communion and in profession of the same faith, the Church of Christ becomes one flock under one supreme shepherd," unquote. Yeah, and it would also be helpful to have a Catholic Pope when making sense of what Pope Leo XIII taught in his encyclical Satis Cognitum, quote, "You are not to be looked upon as holding the true Catholic faith if you do not teach that the faith of Rome is to be held," unquote. So, ladies and gentlemen, if the head of your religion needs to convert to Catholicism, that's an infallible sign that wherever you may be, you are definitely not in the Roman Catholic Church. Tradcast Express is a production of Novus Ordo Watch. Check us out at tradcast.org, and if you like what we're doing, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution at novusordowatch.org/donate.